working with people is the hardest thing that you do through the course of your life. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the first ever episode of Account Management, a Tactical Guide for Success. I'm your co-host, Fred Fuller, here along with my trusted companion, John Brown. John, how the heck are you, man?
I'm great, Fred. That's all I got.
That's all? You're just great?
Yeah, I'm great.
Okay. Well, that's a springboard into what we're going to talk about this episode. So this being the first episode, John, I thought that we would talk a little bit about who we are and what this podcast is about and what we want to achieve. It sound like a plan to you?
That sounds like a great plan, Fred. I'm pretty excited.
You are absolutely worthless right now. Okay. It's going to get better, folks. I promise. I promise it will get better. So why don't we jump in?
I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then I want to talk a little bit about you. And then let's talk about why we're doing this podcast. Does that work?
Let's do it.
So I'll give you my background in a nutshell. I've been doing technology things in Atlanta, Georgia for almost the past 20 years. And many of those roles have revolved around or owned or been a part of some kind of account management function. So various technology companies here in Atlanta, and all of them have touched on the topic that we're going to spend a lot of time on here, which is account management. Prior to being an executive in several technology companies, I started my career as a salesperson for General Electric. And then prior to that, I was actually an officer in the Navy on a nuclear submarine out in Pearl Harbor. Somewhere in there, I went to business school, and that's kind of how I got started down this career path of managing clients, managing various business functions, and becoming a self-styled account management expert.
Self-styled.
So
you didn't...
Soi-disant in the French.
Soi-disant. You didn't...
In the French.
Well, in the streets, you're not biting somebody else's style. Is that the way they would say it? The kids?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's hip-hop.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Wait, did you hit all the points of your background? I don't think you did.
What else do you want to know?
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Tulane University in New Orleans.
Okay.
For undergraduate, which is a fine undergraduate program in a very fine city.
Yeah.
And then for business school, I went to the Wharton School of Business as part of University of Pennsylvania.
Wharton. Mm. Where's that?
It's in Philadelphia.
It's kind of a big. But hey, all kidding aside, I love to bust your chops about this stuff. It's kind of a big deal. Like, you went to arguably the best business school in the world.
We like to think so.
Yeah.
I think some other people might.
Well, look, I went to Georgia State. Georgia State likes to think they're the best business school in the world, right? Everybody wants to think so. But the reality is there's a handful that can really lay claim to having that conversation. And Wharton's one of them. And I've always been impressed because it takes a lot of time and energy and effort and focus to get into one of those programs and to go achieve what you've achieved. I think, and it's important because I think it really does establish who we are and the fact that we do take this very serious. So this podcast is going to be a little silly and goofy, and you're going to hear a couple guys trying to have a good time while talking about a subject matter that is really critical to success. And it really does. I want to frame it up that while we want to have fun, we are serious. We are focused on what we do, and we've been very successful.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, that's a good segue to Let's talk a little bit about Fred Fuller.
Yeah, Fred Fuller.
Fred, what's your background? Yeah. Tell us all about you.
Yeah, I'll start with my horoscope because that might be the most exciting thing about
Pisces?
my background. I am a Sagittarius. No, so much like yourself, I was in the Navy, but I was enlisted, so I did a lot of real work when I was in.
See, you always say that.
I did.
You always say that, but I've never seen any evidentiary proof that you actually did any actual work.
You've never seen that even in real life.
Yeah,
right.
Not even in real life. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I did. I joined the Navy. I was enlisted. I went out to SEAL training, and I ran around on the beach in Coronado, California for a while before I tore up my shoulder. And they said, "Hey, man, go on out to the fleet and wash some dishes." So I got to do that. That was pretty exciting. And then I ended up going to Georgia State and getting a degree in stats. And now I've spent 20 years in the corporate landscape, and a little bit different in that my background was 10 plus years of corporate finance, which I was heavily ingrained in, and then moved over into account management and sales and so forth. And so what's interesting about this, and we'll talk about this probably in later episodes. When you hear that somebody has a background of 10 years plus in corporate finance, you think, how does that tie into account management? And account management really, and you're going to hear these terms interchangeably, right? It's client relationship, it's customer relationship, it's, whatever. But it's a relationship game. And so even in the world of corporate finance, internally, even though that's all internally facing, you still have a customer set that you are beholding to, right?
Wait, I want to go back to your background for a second.
Oh boy, here we go. Sorry, folks.
So you went through sales training and your shoulder blew out, but as I understand it, you went through twice, right? Almost all the way through twice and blew out your shoulders.
Yeah. So I was out there. I went, I would say 3/4 of the way through Hell Week. At the time, that was week 6 of training.
Right.
3/4 of the way through, shoulder gave out, cycled, rehabilitated the shoulder, started the training again. Same thing, roughly 3/4 of the way through Hell Week, and the same problem. It came back to haunt me. So,
well, the thing I always say about military service is, I don't know what you did. I wasn't there. Whenever anybody tells me, about their service, I always say I wasn't there. But I do know one thing about you now from you telling me that, which is you are the kind of person who cares about things larger than themselves. Right, no matter what you did, right?
Yeah,
because you volunteered for something, and I think that's what's good about it. I think these days everybody says thank you for your service, which is nice. Maybe a little bit of a platitude, but it does convey at least one thing, I think, to everybody, which is that you're willing to do something larger than yourself. So that's a good thing, I think. Right.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate that, and I would love to say that I was thinking that broadly when I was 17 years old and joined, but I will absolutely take the compliment, and it's funny that you say that, because when I look at my kids and the next generation, myself and my wife's family both come from a long line of military service. Mm-hmm. Right? My dad was in the military, my grandfather and her dad, and so forth and so forth, and none of my children are actually going down that road right now. Mm-hmm. And on one hand, I'm glad, right? My oldest is in college, and I'm excited with what he's doing. And so I wouldn't mandate that any of them go do military service. And if one of them came home and said they wanted to go into the military, quite frankly, it would make me a little nervous. But I also would, I think, embrace it on some level because of that very thing.
Right. You're something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
That's right. Which I think, and the reason I bring that up is... we're going to talk in a minute about what this podcast is about, but really what this podcast is about embracing relationships with others in a business context, right? And that's what real account management is. And yes, we're going to get into all the tactics and how you do a good business review and lots of things, but at the core of it, it's all about relationships and serving others, right? And that's going to be the core of this podcast, and that's going to be the sun, if you will, to the planets that surround this podcast. Fred,
oh, golly.
For our listeners, Fred really likes it when I use science analogies, or I start talking about science or physics or anything like that. So you can anticipate I'll be dropping in a few science and physics references to what we're doing here.
This is where it's guaranteed to go in the ditch. That's all I can tell you. John's going to talk about phototrons and I don't know, gravitational pulls and orbits. But what's important, John, is we're not here to talk about phototrons, and we're not here to talk about science. And I know you're going to try to drag me into that ditch, and that's fine, because I can handle it. Because dadgummit, I'm good, I'm nice, and people like me.
But you know nothing about science.
No, this is true.
That's not important. Right?
But I do know about account management. So let's talk a little bit about
account management. Wait, one more thing before we get to that. How did we meet? Let's talk about that.
It was a smoky room. Yes. I have no idea where this is going. How did we met working together?
That's right. Yeah. So one of the various technology companies that I mentioned, we met, and you helped me run the account management function there. I plucked you from the miseries of being in corporate finance because I knew that you were a relationship guy, and the rest is history, right? Is that a good? Or do you want to go back to the smoky room?
No, but we'll have to work on the plucked you from the. You make it sound like I was dying and miserable and ready to. That wasn't the case. I worked with great people. I learned a lot. It was wonderful. But I was very glad to make a transition out of corporate finance. But I appreciate the color that you put on that.
That's me making fun of finance professionals. Yeah. No, it's not very fair.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, so let's go ahead and talk about why are we doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Well, sure. I'll kick us off, and then you'll straighten it all out later. That's the way this has worked for years now, John.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can pick up a book. You can walk through a bookstore right now, and you could find 100 books on sales. You could find 101 books on management. You can't find many, if any, books on account management. So there's the sale, but what do you do after the sale, right? What happens after you close the thing and everybody's agreed that we're all going to be friends and we're going to work together? How do you actually go make that happen, right?
That's right. Right. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, most businesses that work primarily in a business-to-business context, so maybe not necessarily consumer-facing businesses, but even consumer-facing businesses have distributors and they have places where they have to sell their product, and so they might have at least some B2B relationships within that context. I mean, it might be the case that up to 10% of your workforce, particularly if you're a technology company, are account managers, right? And so it's this function, to your point, that happens after the sale, and there is literally no scholarship around it whatsoever. So if you pick up the Harvard Business Review, or if you were to go look at the class selection in an MBA program, you're not going to find any classes on account management. And as a matter of fact, to your point, there's not even kind of any post-scholarship literature about it, right? There's, like you said, there's 1 million books on sales. But there aren't very many about account management, and it's just not discussed as a business function. But I would argue it's its own separate business discipline that has its own rules, that has its own norms, that needs to be learned like any good practitioner. We wouldn't let somebody become the CFO without any kind of
people skills.
No. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know. I've met a lot of CFOs without any people skills.
Yeah, but that's not true.
Yeah. But
you're horrible at this.
Thank you. But I don't think. But but we wouldn't let it. Generally, most CFOs have at least some educational background in finance, but or at least some training. But for whatever reason, we let people fall into account management kind of accidentally. And then they become managers of account managers and they grow their business career, but nobody ever talks about what are the basics of that role.
Yeah, I think the other part of it is, and I will come back to the sort of finance conversation that we're having and what I'd mentioned a little earlier, and that is that even if you're not strictly in an account management role, managing external relationships with customers that you have contractual relationships and paying the bills and all that stuff, everybody's got a client. Everybody has relationships that they need to manage, right? And I hate the term management because that has there's an implied manipulation or some sort, there's something slightly mischievous about that word for me when I think about it in that regard. But we all have relationships that we have to manage to, and that can be up and it can be down and it can be sideways. But so if you're in a finance role, don't turn this off and say, well, it's not me. I don't have external customers. No, you do. You have internal customers. When I was in corporate finance, I had customers. Those customers were up the chain, up through the CFO, but they were also the people that I supported in the business units. And maintaining healthy relationships was important for me simply because that's peace of mind every day when you walk into work. If you walk into work and you don't get along with the people and that you're working with and you have, all kinds of tension, then not only is it just not a healthy working environment, but you're not going to do your best. You will not collectively perform your best for the organization. You just won't.
Yeah.
So regardless of the exact nature of your role, this relationship element to me is very important throughout, regardless of what you do. John, what do you?
Yeah, no. I'm glad you said that, because I say that all the time is that, oftentimes, let's say you just happen to stumble upon this podcast and you're not in a classically externally facing account management function, but rather you're a general business person that works more on the inside of a business. So you're in HR, you're in finance, you're in accounting, right? You have customers in those roles.
That's right.
Right? And their customer, and a lot of times you'll ask people, who's your customer? Well, everybody. Well, no, it's probably not everybody. Well, who's your customer? It's my boss. Your boss isn't your customer, right? There's somebody who's your customer.
That's right.
And if you don't know who it is, then you're probably in trouble, is what I like to tell people. And then I usually follow that up with some sort of lesson learned from the world of account management, many of which we'll talk about during this podcast. Right.
Yeah, and if you don't know who it is, it just really is the frame in regards to the way that you're thinking about it. Right. Because you're not taught, that's a great example of that's not something that you're taught in school. When you go into a financial discipline in school, there's not a course where they say, here's who your customers really are, and this is the way you should think about it. That never happens.
If you're in HR, no one in the training pipeline ever says to you, you have a customer, you have customers, right? You have risks, and there's lots of things you get trained on about rules and what not to do, right? But no one ever says, hey, you have somebody you have to serve.
Well, I think this is a very interesting point for me personally, and this really is the sort of the epicenter of account management for me. And that is, I have 3 kids, right? And somewhere along the way, and typically it's like in middle school where kids don't really know who they are. They're no longer little elementary school kids, but they're not high schoolers yet, right? And they're trying to find their identity. And that typically comes with some level of angst and kids trying to establish a pecking order and all this other stuff. And so typically my kids have come home somewhere in those years, and then I'm not getting along with this person. I'm having trouble here. I'm having trouble there. And I've told my kids, and I stand by this very firmly, working with people is the hardest thing that you do through the course of your life.
Right.
It absolutely is. You can pick up a book and you can learn about science and Frodotrons and all the silly stuff that you like to talk about. You can pick up a book and you can learn about finance. You can pick up a book and you can learn about everything that you want to learn about. But seriously, sitting down and understanding relationships and how to read people and how to be successful and create environments that are comfortable and productive is really hard. Yeah. And there just aren't classes. Like, I guess you could go become a psychiatrist, and maybe that's the discipline that we're talking about here, but not, when you got your 4-year business degree, what are the things that are going to enable me to be successful? And this is one of them. And nobody, like we said, there's not books. People don't talk about it.
People don't talk about it. That's exactly right. Great. Well, we talked a little bit about our backgrounds. We talked a little bit about what this podcast is going to be about, account management and why it's needed. Why don't we take 3 minutes and just talk about some of the kind of main topic areas that we're going to talk about over the course of this podcast. And I think hopefully get our listeners excited about what the future holds. So I'll start a little bit. We're going to talk about what are the 3 main jobs of account management, right? So nobody's ever, I think, said, hey, there's an order of priority of what you should think about every day when you get out of bed as an account manager. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the six philosophies of a good client manager.
It's not 5.
It's not 4. It's not 7. It's 6. 6 philosophies of a good client manager. So I think that'll be useful for everybody. We're going to talk about a lot of the tactics of being a good client manager. And so, and we're going to talk about it from the standpoint of what have you just got thrown in the role yesterday. So previously you were a really great developer, or you were a really great operations person, or you were working in some other part of the business, and then you're thrown into this role because someone said and I'm doing air quotes here, they have client hands, or they're good with clients, so let's put them in a client-facing role. And then no one taught you anything about how to go about doing it, right? Yeah. So we're going to fill you up along the way with a lot of tactics for actually being a good client manager. We're going to talk about things like how to do a good quarterly business review. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about how to travel.
How to travel, account manager,
yeah. Right? Which is not just how to travel, but also how to
entertain.
Said how to entertain, how to set up the logistics of a meeting, right? Yeah. Because not only you're, unlike maybe your previous role, you're not just coordinating yourself, you're actually coordinating across an entire company. So we're going to talk about that.
Let me tell you, the entertainment thing is very interesting because I've recently started a new gig, mm-hmm. right? And I've noticed there are things that I take for granted that I learned because I learned them a long time ago, and so they're second nature and I don't have to think about them. But I find myself out with others that haven't been exposed to certain techniques and thoughts and approaches yet, and it becomes really obvious. So little things like when you take a client out, who orders the wine? Do you get appetizers for that? Like, it's little things that, again, if you've been doing it for a while, it's second nature. You're not even thinking about it. But when you get around somebody who hasn't been doing it, you realize, like, holy smokes, like, okay.
That's right. So it's we're going to talk about all the unspoken rules. Yep. We're going to speak them because podcasting is about speaking.
Yes.
Someone write that down.
Right.
We're going to talk about the small tactics you can do to get good really quickly at a lot of the different things that account managers have to be good at. You have to be like a little bit of a project manager. We're going to talk about how to kind of just really quickly get kind of good at that. You have to be a good negotiator, right? And since you just got thrown in this role, mm-hmm. you don't know, like, let's say you came from development, right?
Yeah.
And nobody has taught you how to negotiate. So we're going to teach you how to get kind of good really quick, and good enough to do the job.
Yeah. And you know what we're going to do? Because our book, it's not intended to be a book on negotiations, right? It's not intended to be a book on various aspects of this. It's intended to be a book that creates this level of exposure. And so we will, along the way, as we get into some of these subjects, we'll provide some other resources that we found helpful along the way. And you can follow along and you can email us and all that good stuff. And we'll provide all that information. But I think that's some of the stuff that we'll be doing along the way. I don't know, John?
Yeah. And at some point along the way, closer to the end, we're going to talk about how fundamentally being a good account manager is about being a person of character and being a good leader, mm-hmm. and how all those things tie back into the 3 main jobs and the 6 main philosophies. So we're going to, at some point, wrap it all together and say, hey, go out there and be successful as an account manager.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. And in our second episode, we will start into the main content of how we frame being a good account manager. So stay tuned with us. Like us and rate us on iTunes and all the podcast platforms. Yeah. And also stay tuned we will be discussing our upcoming book that will be a companion piece to this podcast.
Give us a big thumbs up, good buddy. Is that
all right?
All right. Next week.
Look forward to more. Thanks, everybody.
Check us out.